Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, your home for news breaking down the pedophile networks, breaking down the surveillance state, breaking down the key to finding spiritual balance as well as mental, physical balance, the key to evolving past the current paradigms. Yep, that's right, the Conscious Resistance Network. And today we are going to talk about 9/11. Before we do that, though, I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com so you can get all of our latest content. You can follow us over on minds.com, Steam it, join our Discord channel, sign up for our text list updates because I send out a text every time there's a new video or article and you don't want to miss it. You can also follow us on BitChute in addition to YouTube if you choose. And if you want to support, check out Patreon or Subscribestar. Finally, subscribe to our email newsletter, and if you want to get a free ounce of kratom, check out this link right here from My Brave Botanicals. Help support our work and get you some of nature's medicine. So it's that time again. It's the 18th anniversary. Wow, 18th anniversary of, wait, is it 18th? Yeah, 18th anniversary of 9/11 coming up here, and it's only days away. I'm working on getting an interview with a couple of people who are still in the 9/11 truth community in the coming days. For those who followed my work for years or more than a year or two, you know that 9/11 is something that I've been focused on, well, since the very beginning of my work, which started around 2010. 9/11 was one of the first things I really got involved with. I was working with volunteering with a local group here in Houston, the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and most of it was older folks, and just kind of got plugged in that way, hosting documentary screenings. And then in 2010, I went to New York City 2011, for the 10th anniversary. I went to New York City for there was Liberty Fest and all kinds of other 9/11 related events, and I met a lot of activists, and that was really the beginning of a lot of my work. The year prior to that, of the 9th anniversary, I went to D.C. in Virginia. I went to the Pentagon and went to experience that whole thing. But my point is 9/11 has been really intrinsic to my work since the beginning, and especially related to this story, which we see here, that the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which have been funding a study for the last 4 years from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, just released on September 4th the preliminary results of the final draft of this study. And this press release says, university study finds fire did not cause third tower's collapse on 9/11. The fall of the 47-story World Trade Center 7 building in New York City late in the afternoon was not the result of fires, according to a draft report released yesterday by researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks following a 4-year computer modeling study of the tower's collapse. The team's findings contradict those of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce, which concluded in a 2008 report that World Trade Center 7 was the first tall building ever to collapse primarily due to fire. The collapse of this building has long been the subject of controversy with critics of the government account arguing that it was brought down in a controlled demolition. Now, University of Alaska Fairbanks civil engineer professor Leroy Holsey, who's been the lead principal investigator for the last 4 years, him and his team, Feng Xiao, an associate professor of Nanjing University of Science and Technology, and Zili Quan, a bridge engineer for the South Carolina Department of Transportation. And Holsey is quoted as, quote, "Our study found that fires in WTC-7 could not have caused the collapse recorded on video. We simulated every possible scenario, and we found that the series of failures that NIST claimed triggered a progressive collapse of the entire structure could not have occurred. The only thing that could have brought the structure down in the manner observed on 9/11 is the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building below floor 17. Then the study, again, was funded by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. The release of this draft report begins a 2-month period during which the public is invited to submit comments. The final report will be published later this year. The research team plans to make public by the end of September all of the data used and generated during the study, a decision that contrasts with NIST's withholding of key modeling data on the grounds that releasing it, quote, might jeopardize public safety. And of course, that is because NIST was involved in the 9/11 cover-up, and so they've never released their models or their procedures on how they concluded the things they did, which is the opposite of what this university here is doing. And I will include this link here. I'm about an hour into this, almost done with this presentation. The World Trade Center Building 7 collapse findings, which was the actual presentation that Professor Holsey released the other day at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and it's an hour and 12 minutes long, and it it's going to be kind of boring for some folks because it gets into the nitty gritty of the study. But for those who actually want to hear the science and everything behind how they came to this conclusion, I recommend watching that and checking it out. Now, this study is not actually new, unfortunately, but it is relevant information. I reported here I am with short hair back in 2016, 3 years ago, interviewing Dr. Halsey as they released preliminary study results in 2016, basically claiming the same thing. So it was originally supposed to be a 2-year study. This is the thing, and you can find my article here on Mint Press, and you can see some of the interviews I did there. Leroy Halsey discusses World Trade Center 7. I also interviewed Daniel Sheehan discussing the legal battle for the 9/11 narrative. And so I covered this a couple of years ago. And at that time, they said it was preliminary results that had already just, concluded and found on based on what they knew then, that the building couldn't have collapsed because of fire. And they were claiming they were going to be releasing it later that year. And see, this is the presentation he gave in 2017. So I'm trying to reach out to him to ask him, like, what's the difference between what you concluded in 2017 and 2019? Because the reason I say this, at the time I reported a final report will be published in early 2018 and submitted to peer-reviewed journals. Here we are late 2019, and it's just now coming out. I'm not trying to be overly critical. If you listen to this presentation I just showed you, he talks about why it took them so long and how they tried all different kinds of models, and they wanted to be clear on what did and did not cause the collapse. So they studied all kinds of different angles, and I think that's important. But you can read this article about Building 7 and about this study. And again, I wrote this in 2017, September 11th, 2017, when they were first releasing this. And yeah, I think it's important to note that that doesn't mean it's false, but I do know that the reason I'm bringing this up is I know the critics are going to say, oh, what took them an extra 2 years? Were they making sure that the results, benefited the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth? And of course, some folks are going to just, balk at this immediately because it's funded by A&E. But this is a man, Dr. Halsey, who's got 2 decades plus worth of credentials, working specifically with bridges and buildings and things like this. So he's got the experience to comment on this and to do this work. And he's got a team of people working with him. And he's at an actual university. This isn't some online backwoods college that they just A&E found that they found some professors willing to take some money and put a study together that would agree with them. It seems to be legitimate. But I'm just saying, I know the critics are going to say, well, why did it go from being a 2-year study to a 4-year study? And I don't know. So I'm waiting to hear back from Dr. Halsey and from Richard Gage to report back to you guys. And unfortunately, this will be the second year that I won't be in New York City or DC for 9/11. Just there's so much going on with this campaign and things I got going on at home at the moment, so I can't be out there. There's a really big event. I saw William Binney and some others are going to be speaking in New York City this Saturday, September 7th. Wish I could be there to talk more about this and get more interviews for you guys, but if I can get a Skype interview with Richard or with Dr. Halsey to talk more about this, that is my plan. I've already sent out the emails. We'll see what we hear back. Because again, I'd like to know, well, when I interviewed you, Dr. Halsey, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what's the difference between now and then? Because you've already presented this, as I show right here. You can, preliminary study results show fire not the cause of the collapse. So 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, they're already saying that basically the study showed that there was no way that fire could have caused this collapse. Actually, you see, I have 2 articles here. 9/11 Truth Movement Still Peeling Back Layers of U.S. Government's 9/11 Narrative. This is in September 2016. I'm guessing this is the first time that I interviewed Dr. Halsey. So at that time, they were already saying, yep, this is May 2015 is when they first started. So it's been over 4 years. So at that time, he was already saying, they were going to investigate whether or not, the fire caused it. But back then in 2016, it is our preliminary conclusions based upon our work to date that the fire did not produce the failure at this particular building. So I was one of the first people to report that back in 2016. Then by 2017, they were able to confirm it for sure. And here we are 2019, and they're saying it even further. Maybe I'm getting into the minutia here, but I'm just saying I don't know what the discrepancy is or what the difference is. And, my thoughts on the 9/11 Truth Movement for a moment. As I said, I was got really involved in it in 2010, and by that point it seems like it had already hit its peak. Started right after 9/11. 2005, 2006 were really huge in New York with tens and thousands of people out there. And 2010, when I went, it was really big. The 10th anniversary was probably the last time it was really big with thousands of people out there, and even that, from what I heard, was small compared to other years. But I just think that there's so many people in that movement, like any other movement, that are just focused on fighting amongst themselves about, was it nuclear? Was it controlled demolition? Was it dustification from directed energy weapons? Were there no planes? And, and I think this is the whole thing. This is what the intelligence agencies want. They know that we're on to some truth. We have some basic understanding. Hey, we were lied to. This is what they told us happened, didn't happen. But we don't know the full truth. And sometimes these intelligence agencies, we know they will put out disinformation and false information to muddy the waters and to confuse us and have us fighting among ourselves. So I've stepped away from that for the most part, but I will continue to go. I want to get back to New York for 9/11. I think it's important as a journalist to be there covering this and asking these questions because as my friend James Corbett reported in his video the other day, there's no one in the media, the corporate media at all, who's even acknowledging that this study exists. And even if you were thinking this outside of like speculating on conspiracies, even if you were just the most, straightforward, objective reporter writing some, copy for Associated Press, you could imagine that this would still be a story. We're approaching the anniversary of 9/11. You have a university in Alaska, again, not just some bunk university, but an actual university with a professor leading the charge who has decades of experience. And they conclude that fires could not have caused the collapse of the third building that fell that day, that we're told collapsed because of fire. You don't even have to get into, well, then how did it collapse or any of that stuff. But just to report on that alone, it seems like if we had a real media, if you can imagine, guys, in the United States or anywhere in the world, that there was an actual media that had television access and all these things. Of course, the real media exists. We're out here in the streets. We're on the internet. We're on YouTube and all this. But the people who have control of the narrative through televisions and through the advertising, they're not doing real journalism. And so you're not going to hear about this anywhere else. But as I said, I'm going to try to get an interview with Dr. Halsey and Richard Gage and see what we can find out more about this and ask some questions. I recommend checking out this whole presentation from the University of Alaska Fairbanks website, and I will include that in the description below. And that's it, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Keep digging for 9/11 truth because 9/11 is still important. 9/11, some people have moved on and, or think that 9/11 never mattered or don't understand it. But 9/11 changed so much. Even though I was only 17 when 9/11 happened, I still remember the difference between before and after. And I see how much the country has changed. And you guys know 9/11 is the 24/7 excuse for everything and anything the state wants, including taking your rights away, taking away your privacy. And the people who are being born into this world have no idea how different it has been in the past and how different it could be. And the only way they will know is if we keep that idea alive, to keep the idea of freedom, of privacy, of liberty, of autonomy, and of community building and working within our own hands, with our own hearts. If we keep those ideas alive, then they will stay alive and the future generations will know them. But if not, if we acquiesce and we submit and we blindly worship and trust authority, then there is no hope for them in the future. So it has to start with you now. And exposing 9/11 is key to that. So please keep asking questions. If you haven't seen my 9/11 documentaries, check out our YouTube playlist, 9/11 Declassified. Check it out. It's from a few years ago, but it's still relevant. And until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.